Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
And a good morning to you all. It's, oops, I didn't let the music play out, did I? Sorry. Yeah, I'm just, yike. So the judge is about to give the jury the jury's about to get the case, and here we are. Oh boy, I have no idea, nor do you, if this jury will be quick. I don't think so. Or surely by the end of the week. And I want to say this about this jury. Could we give them like a Congressional Medal of Honor or something? And this is before I know how they're going to decide. Good Lord. It's not often we turn our attention to what is asked of a jury, a juror. And in this particular case, I mean, obviously much has been asked. And I feel for them. I felt for them yesterday as the closing arguments went on ad nauseum in what has been described as a very uncomfortable courtroom, too hot, too cold. I just can't even imagine what they've sort of suffered and yet have gotten themselves a place in history. So I guess a lot of people would suffer a bit for a place in history. So and now we wait. Whew. You know, the big news today that I saw that just gladdened my heart. And as is so often the case when things are made right after an historical wrong, it's good, but it always feels like too long in coming. And that is the fact that today, all the statistics for Major League Baseball will change today, all of them. Whatever they'd been, whatever player had been said to be the top of any category could likely today find themselves no longer on top. And that is because today is the day when officially Major League Baseball will incorporate the statistics from the Negro Leagues into its record book, so that it will not matter whether you played in the all-white majors or in the Negro League. All of those players will now be looked at in a historical context as equals. And I'll tell you, there's a guy who played right here who is going to end up on top of a whole bunch of lists. And that is Josh Gibson of the Homestead Greys. He died at the age of 35 from a stroke. But he will now be at the top of several Major League Baseball lists. His slugging percentage means he will top Babe Ruth by a bunch. So Babe Ruth today finds himself, I think, number 2, maybe even number 3. Josh Gibson hit .718 as slugging percentage. .690 is Babe Ruth. And Ruth has held that position for nearly a century, and it's probably a good thing he ain't around to see himself taken off of that particular pedestal. And also, Josh Gibson will be on top of the batting average, the most extraordinary batting average ever accumulated, 466. And that he got with the 1943 Greys. And that is 60 points higher than Ted Williams, whose 1941 mark was 406. 466 beats 406 by quite a bit. So Josh Gibson of the Homestead Greys, today elevated to his rightful position, and others as well, some of whom their names are not even familiar to us. The top 10 list as of today for such statistics as batting average, slugging percentage, on base percentage, all are going to change dramatically. So now the list of career batting average leaders will include Oscar Charleston. You know him? He's going to be number 3. Judd Wilson, number 5. Turkey Stearns, I love it, number 6. Buck Leonard, 8th. And that's the change in the top 10 there. Also, Satchel Paige, who played for the Kansas City Monarchs. He's now going to be rightfully and historically put as the third lowest single season ERA of all time. And the top of the leaderboard for on base percentage will read now Ted Williams, Babe Ruth, Josh Gibson. And if a player played in both leagues, like Jackie Robinson and others, they'll get obviously a statistical boost too, because now their stats from the Negro Leagues will be folded in to all of their stats. So I don't know what that does to Jackie Robinson, but he will get credit for the 49 hits he had with the Monarchs, KC Monarchs, in 45. And says here that Minnie Minoso's 150 hits from his New York Cuban days. So there was a Cuban league? New York Cubans. Oh, that was one of the teams? We'll push him over 2,000 hits for his career, something that had not been the case. So I just think that this is, again, a long time coming, and baseball, more than almost any other sport that I'm aware of, is a game where numbers and stats play just this huge part in determining a player's value. So this is remedied as of today. And this comes almost 4 years after Major League Baseball said it would consider the Negro Leagues as major leagues. But now it's a done deal. These were all major league players, and separated only by the societal bigotry of the time in which they played. So the headline in the Washington Post article about this today is Josh Gibson will dominate Major League Baseball's record books. Pretty amazing. My God. So I'm happy about that. Don't know about you, but I'm happy about that. I came across, well, you might have too if you get the Sunday New York Times, a very interesting piece talking about history too, because we don't know it. We don't know our history. And when we do, our perception of our present often is changed immeasurably. And knowing our history from whence we came or come is really important to understanding almost everything, political, social, even personal, right? I mean, if you've ever been in therapy, they ain't talking about, the present as much as you go back, try to figure out where you came from. Well, there was a piece about domestic terror in this country and also the results of domestic terror. That the domestic terror that was rampant in this country in the early part of the 20th century gave rise to the beginnings of what we now would refer to as a surveillance state, gave rise to keeping a tab on certain people, gave rise to J. Edgar Hoover and the newly formed Federal Bureau of Investigation. And if you look at the domestic terrorists of that time, they too were political. I say too because the domestic terrorists of our time are political, and they come from the right, overwhelmingly from the right. That's where the threat is now. The threat in the early 20th century was not from the right, it was from the left. And so the early domestic terror, which was very much like the terror we're terrified about reoccurring now, was coming from the left. From socialist agitators, from anarchists. Emma Goldman, she was considered like one of the major ones. But what you learn from reading this history is that it just dovetails they were using bombs. They were killing civilians. They were engaged in reprehensible acts of violence. And this coincided with a guy named Nobel inventing dynamite. And in fact, what the New York City Police Department ended up calling these anarchists the Dynamite Club because they used it. A sidebar in Nobel's invention of dynamite. You wonder why. And again, like so many scientists who had an idea to harness some kind of energy, they were thinking of all the good stuff it could do. And you're thinking, dynamite? What good stuff could that do? Well, it allowed for the building of tunnels, subways, the ability to clear uh, huge amounts of land. But these wily lefties, they saw it as an incredible tool to bring down what they saw as an oppressive capitalist system. Man, they were bombing everything. They bombed St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, not once, but twice. They bombed other churches in Manhattan. They bombed the Bronx courthouse. They bombed the city courthouse. They were placing bombs everywhere, and lots of people were being killed. They even figured out how to make essentially a dirty bomb so that shrapnel would create more damage and more death. And the horror that this created, the fear it created, and at the time, the police and the feds really did not have a system of tracking criminals, of being a step ahead of them, of being aware. And so this kind of terror helped push government to do what it had not wanted to do because it seemed un-American. It seemed like what countries that weren't democracies did. The spring of 1919, more than 30 mail bombs were sent to prominent men all over the country. Oliver Wendell Holmes, the Attorney General, J.P. Morgan, John D. Rockefeller. They all got bombs in the mail. And then just a few weeks after the mail bombs exploded in a synchronized attack in 8 cities all across the United States. They targeted churches, judges, immigration officials, capitalists, mayors, state congressmen. This is what we're fearing now. And look, did you know? It was the left who was doing it. My God, there was this guy who was a professor at Harvard and then I think he's a little nuts. And he was, because it says here he's a former professor at Harvard. And he got hold of 200 sticks of dynamite. This is in 1915. He planted some of them. Listen to this. He put them on a ship, a steamer, that was carrying munitions to the European war front, World War I. He put the dynamite on a munitions ship. And oh yeah, it exploded several days later. You can imagine. he also, this former Harvard professor, detonated an explosive in the Capitol building in D.C. And then he went to J.P. Morgan's home on Long Island and he shot him. I don't think he killed him. Now, that puts Alexander Berkman, the Russian-born anarchist and lover of Emma Goldman, well, there were many lovers of Emma Goldman, really in the forefront, in that he came to Pittsburgh to blow away Henry Clay Frick, and as I think we know, while he grievously wounded him, he did not kill him. And then Berkman did time in the jail down there on Grant Street. And boy, for having tried to kill one of the biggest capitalists in the country, I mean, and then to get out, I mean, I don't know how long his sentence was, but it couldn't have been too long, because the guy gets out and is part of this anarchist terror that then was seen all over the country, but especially on the East Coast. I mean, I'm looking at a picture of him, and he's speaking at a rally in Union Square in 1914. So, wow. Anyway, the article is really talking about unintended consequences. So these lefties, in their murderous self-righteousness, actually ended up giving rise to J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI, and this article says that in the history of, if you are a student of domestic terror in the United States, in the history of terrorism on American soil, only the September 11th, 9/11, only 9/11 eclipses what happened in this bombing campaign of 1919 in terms of scope and complexity of the operation. And so that scope, that amount of death and destruction, made it clear that city police were simply not equipped to take on this threat posed by leftist terrorists. And so, even though, as I mentioned, there had been this long-standing, principled refusal to create a national detective agency, they realized they had to, because reality said we had to. Now, at the time, the Attorney General, he was really pissed off, because he had been on the receiving end, as had his family, of some of these assaults, including the mail bombs. And so we ended up getting a Federal Bureau of Investigation. And there was a new unit specifically dedicated to the revolutionary threat on the home front. And that was given over to a guy named John Edgar Hoover. So there you go. In some respects, I guess, what does that tell us? What is it? Is there a moral here? There's nothing new under the sun. Lefties in this period are the bad guys, the terrorists. And now we face a similar threat, but it's coming from the right. No one should get on their high horse. I don't know. I think it's good knowing history. What Hoover ended up doing, by the way, is he really was going after Emma Goldman. And he shipped Emma Goldman. I mean, these are after they compiled all the damning information and all of that, and whatever. There was a boatload of anarchists, many of them from Russia, and over 200 of them, and they were put on a ship and sent back. I'm sure the Russians were thrilled, or the Soviets at the time. Oh. So I thought that was sort of interesting. And now I want to engage in a rant, if you would indulge me. Destination weddings. Okay? What the you know what? What? I mean, I was talking to a friend. She just got back from a destination wedding. So, in order to go to this wedding, a person was expected to, on their own dime, fly to Italy, spend a week on their own dime, have to take part in scheduled activities of, joyous frivolity, I guess, lots of eating and drinking and who knows what, and then returning home. And I said, "Good God, what did that cost you?" She said, "I refuse to even. I told myself I'm not even going to look." I said, "Well, you didn't get him a wedding present too?" And she said, "Yes, I did." And I thought, whoa, what is this? What is with this? There's something so outrageously over the top and self-centered about it that I want, don't invite me to any destination anything. And when I asked, so how many people were there, it was over 100 people from all over the place, mostly the groom's family, apparently, and friends. But good God, first of all, it's such a classist thing to do. Because, I mean, only people of means can go. And yet, I know of many instances where there's a destination wedding and friends of the bride and or groom are young people that do not have the means. And so they either have to go into debt or put themselves in a position. I can't even imagine asking friends to do that. I literally cannot imagine. Now, while I was railing about destination weddings at an event last night, a woman who was seated next to me said that her sister had a destination wedding. And she said she was married in, I can't remember, Aruba or something. It was she was 65 years old and it was her first wedding. I said, I'd give that one a pass. Absolutely. You're 65 years old, you finally get married. Damn, pull out all the stops. But I mean, I'm sort of against, I've always had a I always have thought that the spending that goes on around weddings is ridiculous and such a waste of money. But I speak as somebody who, you know, uh, got married in my backyard. I speak as somebody who had to be dragged by my mother to find something to wear. And then totally uninterested in wedding bands and stuff like that. So that it was my sister and my fiance who went to pick out the rings. I kid you not. I didn't want any of this crap. Pick out my china? I don't want no china. I don't want no what? Sterling silver that I've got to polish? I just didn't get it. And here I am, a whole lot older, and I still don't get it. But dear God in heaven, asking people to attend this special event in your life, but requiring them to spend God knows how much time, money, effort to show their friendship is just, I don't know. What is wrong with people? If anybody's got another point of view here, come on in, because I don't get it. I really don't get it. And then there's these like destination weddings, and 2 years later, you hear that the couple split. Do you get your money back? I don't know. You get the impression I'm a little bit of a stick in the mud. Well, it's true. I am a stick in the mud. But I'm sorry. Just ludicrous. Oh, excuse me. I think no. Oh, had a call there for a sec, and they disappeared on me. Okay, I've just been wanting to get that off my chest because it's insane. Uh, okay, I'm just looking. So the judge is now doing his thing. This judge, okay, while we're giving a congressional medal for with the thanks of the nation to the jurors, I think we should do the same for Judge Mershon. Whoa, whoa. God help him. And you do know that even if, I mean, what happens after the fact? Let's say they come back, they convict him. Then we've got a convict running. Well, a convict, they will appeal, but he will be a convict. He's gonna, if that happens, he's got to go and get a probation officer. He's got to go through the whole thing. Um, and I suppose in some ways he will use that, right, to what he perceives as his benefit now that he's staking out this outlaw image. He's decided as he so often does, to double down, to own it, right? So he's now, he has always surrounded himself with crooks and criminals because he's a crook and a criminal. I mean, if we start thinking about all the people around him who are either under indictment or who have served time or who would have if he hadn't pardoned them, I mean, it's a list that just keeps on growing. And then, and the latest thing now is he like has criminals, front and center at his. Well, we talked the other day about, that the red tie, blue suit brigade, the mini-me brigade, is full of also convicted, the former police commissioner of New York, the Hells Angels guy, and then he was in the Bronx the other day, and he brings two rappers who are under indictment, facing trials for conspiracy to commit murder. He had them on. Hey, here's my new friend Chef G and Sleepy Hallow. Want to come on and say a few words? So he's just leaning in, I suppose, to the delight of his fans. I don't know. So an old-fashioned kind of Republican, a guy who had served on Jeb Bush's presidential campaign. He's quoted in an article saying, I mean, I don't think people appreciate the degree to which Trump has embraced the image of lawlessness, surrounding himself with accused criminals and convicts. I mean, this is a guy named Tim Miller. He's practically apoplectic. He says, this is unthinkable, but it's not, because we're living in Trump world. Nothing is unthinkable. And oh, big shocker! We mentioned that the special prosecutor, Jack Smith, special counsel, I guess is the proper title. Jack Smith had asked the judge to gag Trump from making incendiary, not to mention totally false statements about federal officers intending to kill him while serving his warrant at Mar-a-Lago. And I think when we mentioned, Susan and I mentioned that the other day, we said we wouldn't waste any breath wondering if Judge Eileen Cannon would agree that that was a good idea. Of course, she did not. But she is, boy, what a she said, no, I'm not going to do it. But she always finds a little, procedural thing. She said, I'm again, the thing being delay, delay, delay. She said, you didn't cross the T's and dot the I's, because I have here in my little handbook that before you make a request like this to me, you should inform the defendant's lawyers. And I do not think you did. So I'm sorry, I am turning you down. Now, it could well be that, okay, they'll call up Trump's lawyers and tell him, we're going to ask again. And I'm telling you now, we're going to ask for this, and send it back to her. And the thing is, she'll find some other reason. She'll be the attorney general. So I just want to share a quick obit for a guy that chances are you didn't know of, but I did. And I did because when I was a young girl, um, looking up to my big brother, he informed my sense of what good music was. And I'm so grateful he was for a kid in, a backwater like Green Bay, Wisconsin. He was aware of this effort to bring to a larger audience some of the old incredible black music. And so I, when I would have been like about 11 or 12, maybe, I was being schooled by my brother about, lead belly and and um, and the people who were trying to bring that music to a larger audience. And one of those people was a guy named John Kerner. And my brother had an album with John Kerner on it and two other guys. They were a trio. And they were called, I'm not sure what the hell were they called. The album, though, I'll remember to the day I die because it was amazing and still is. And it's called Blues, Rags, and Hollers. Blues, Rags, and Hollers. And the guy, John Kerner, went by the nickname of Spider. Spider Kerner. And man, if you can find that album, it is mind blowing. It was released in '63. And in the obit, they say it was an attempt by these young, middle class white young guys to, I guess now the word would be appropriate, but I thought of it as to introduce, to build on the black blues musicians. And here's what David Bowie, wrote in 2003 in Vanity Fair in an article in which he included Blues, Rags, and Hollers among his list of 25 greatest albums. He wrote, demolishing the puny vocalizations of folk trios like the Kingston Trio and Peter, Paul, and what's her name. Spider, Kerner, and company showed how it should be done. Turns out the Doors signed with Elektra Records because Elektra Records had issued Blues, Rags, and Hollers, and they thought anyone who did that, we want to be with you. John Lennon always spoke of Kerner, Ray, and Glover, those are the other two, as being just unbelievable. But the other thing he's most known for, and what the obit makes a big to-do of, is that these guys were in Minnesota, okay? That's the Kerner was at the University of Minnesota. And in 1959, a kid from a small town in northern Minnesota, Hibbing, came down to the University of Minnesota as an incoming freshman. His name, of course, is Bobby Zimmerman. And he took up with John Kerner. And Kerner schooled him. They lived together for a while. They even performed as a duo. Bobby began calling himself Bobby Dylan. And following Spider Kerner, he dropped out of college. So a lot of people say that Dylan sort of ripped Kerner off in some ways, but Kerner. The thing is that's where you come up with all this. You know, people, all artists stand atop those that have come before. It's not necessarily, as a matter of fact, I think, yeah, they did. Wait, the obit does actually. Kerner was often asked about Dylan, and he said he told Billboard in 2016, "People have told me I influenced Dylan. I wouldn't put it that way." What's the quote? "A great artist doesn't copy, they steal. You take something and make it your own." And that's fair enough. And I love that. He didn't begrudge Dylan. Dylan did, yeah. He stole it and he made it his own. So, Spider John Kerner. And if you can't, I'd like to, that album's long gone. Blues, Rags, and Hollers. I just love to get uh, my hands on it and get a earful. But it's a doozy. And I'm sure that if I, had it here right now and we played it, we'd agree. It's a doozy. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can take David Bowie's, okay, and The Doors and John Lennon. So there you have it. Spider Kerner. Oh. So listen, I have always prided myself on trying to not throw things out that could be used by somebody else. And I just had the air knocked out of me by reading a damn article that tells me that, when I feel good about taking all these my clothes I'm not wearing anymore, I mean, they're perfectly fine clothes. I'm not giving away, dirty, ripped stuff. These are good clothes. When I bundle those up and give them to a charity, I'm assuming they will then be found on somebody else's body and appreciated and live on. And that's all for the good. And this is where learning stuff can be so dispiriting. I found out that the vast majority of the clothes we give to charities ends up in landfills in Africa. Mm-hmm. Seriously. It is such a problem, in fact, that African governments are begging well meaning folk like us to stop. Just stop it. It doesn't mean I don't know. I'm thinking maybe, well, then maybe I should do a consignment shop, or I should do like, Fetterman's uh, free store. Where I don't know. I mean, I don't think it means you shouldn't ever, but I guess to be aware, because the chances are pretty damn good that your clothes will end up dumped in Africa, winding up in their landfills, in their water, and eventually breaking down into microplastics in Africa. And there they will harm human health, marine life, and local economies. Now, just a few years ago, the United States was the world's largest exporter of used clothing. That's according to the UN. And Africa was like the main destination. But it doesn't get to where you think it's going. There was an effort by a group of East African countries to ban it, to make it illegal for folks in America and other places to dump their clothes in Africa. And a whole bunch of countries did join forces. And this was 2016. The president of the United States at the time was one Donald J. Trump, and he retaliated against these African nations. He threatened them that he would remove them from a program that is essentially, I don't know what it's called, but is at the core of United States African trade policy. And he said, if you don't let us send our old clothes, I'm knocking you out of this altogether. Not surprisingly, that was a direct result of lobbyists. You know who the lobbyists were? The lobbyists are representing used clothing sorters. Who knew? I think of all the people dealing with used clothing as like working working on a shoestring out of the goodness of their hearts, blah blah blah. And it turns out, no, they employ lobbyists and they protect their domain. Wow. So, like I said, I think I started talking about how it's important to know our history. And now I'm saying learning stuff sometimes is just so, so upsetting. It's like, oh no, come on. Now what am I supposed to do? Really? What's the right thing? Like, I don't have a clue. Okay. And now, let me see. Oh, yeah. I came across this quote, and it was by someone in the news biz trying to explain why the news is so focused always on the negative. And here's what it says. And it's true. Again, it's about human nature. People are more likely to click, watch, listen to, and share content that induces outrage. Yep. That's what we send off to, people got to know about this. It is our nature. And this human predisposition toward negativity it informs how news operations work, but it's long been a subject for like psychologists and social scientists. And it's actually, I mean, there's actually something called negativity bias, and it is a innate bias apparently on how humans process information and gravitate toward certain information. And I don't know, maybe it's something as basic as you have to know if you're under threat, right? I mean, if you're a cave, we're a cave person now, and the bias would be toward knowing, what's out there that can hurt me. What is so maybe it's just sort of a, I guess what I'm saying is a kind of survival uh, skill that, when applied to other aspects of our existence, doesn't help us. And in fact, again, creates more trouble. Because journalism is also in this country a business, journalists gravitate as well toward these negative stories because they're seeking an audience. And if they're aware, as they are, of what we click on, what we watch, what we listen to, what we share, well, that's what they're going to give us. So you end up with this sort of cycle of bad news. And yet, media uh, really make it worse. I want to share something with you that is just so mind blowing. Um, what Trump, sorry, what Trump put out Memorial Day weekend. This is the guy who some people think should be president again. Happy Memorial Day to all, including the human scum that's working so hard to destroy our once great country, and to the radical left Trump hating federal judge in New York that presided over, get this, 2 trials that awarded a woman who I never met $91 million for defamation. And he went on to attack Jean Carroll again, which, I mean, he can't shut up. But he was also, you might have seen, booed at the Libertarian Convention, which was wonderful to see. He also reposted a video that was taken of one of his supporters screaming at Joe Scarborough, the MSNBC host. And says here, and forgive my language, I'm just quoting. This is what Donald Trump sent out. A video of a man screaming at Scarborough, he'll get rid of all you fucking liberals. You liberals are gone when he fucking wins. You fucking blowjob liberals are done. Uncle Donnie's gonna take this election. Landslide. Landslide, you fucking half a blowjob. Landslide. Get the fuck out of here, you scumbag. This is the presidential candidate of the Republican Party. And it is noted that and the things I've just shared with you gets very little media attention. Matt Gertz of Media Matters reported this. And here shows the absolute refusal of media to play fair here. ABC, CBS, and NBC provided 18 times more coverage of the Democratic nominee in 2016, Hillary Clinton's comments saying you could put half of Trump supporters into what I call a basket of deplorables. Okay? The media, as you know, went berserk over that. But with Trump's stuff that he spews, calling Americans, I'm calling for almost Americans to be killed, calling Democrats, the enemies of the nation, the vermin, that kind of thing. Does that get the same kind of treatment? No. So somebody crunched the numbers. The deplorables comment that Hillary made got 9 times more coverage than Trump's calling human beings vermin. And the ratio of the coverage of those two things, vermin versus deplorables, in the highest circulating US newspapers was 29 to 1. 29 times more coverage of Hillary calling some Trump supporters deplorable, as opposed to Trump calling Americans and immigrants and others vermin. 29 to 1. So just want to point out, it isn't just negativity bias. It's also a bias of whose unfortunate verbiage is given attention. Just saying. All right, guys, that's it. As it for me. I'm going to go on with my day and hope you do the same with yours. I don't know what choice we have. And God help us. The jury's going to be in the jury room. Whoa. Say a prayer for him. I'm serious. Say a prayer.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.